On January 31st, 2020, Parliament received a request for a closed-door meeting with the Committee of Finance from the CFT to be held on Tuesday, February 18, 2020 at 11:45. The meeting was confirmed by Parliament, and hence a central committee was scheduled, seeing that the composition of the committees of Parliament hasn't been re-established as yet. CFT was notified, however, that the meeting would be public. On Friday, February 14, 2020, I had a conversation with the Secretary of the CFT, Mr. Thuis, and explained the reasons why I deemed it important to have this meeting open rather than behind closed doors. The CFT expressed its opinion that the meeting should be closed as this was based on custom. Members of Parliament, I forwarded to you an email that I then, after that telephone conversation, sent to the CFT to really explain in as much detail as possible the motivation for why I believe this meeting should be open to the public. And as the public is watching, I will go over this email as follows. I said, "Good day, Mr. Thuis. I hereby confirm receipt of this email and would like to express my position on this matter to the board of the CFT. As expressed to you today, I am of the opinion that the CFT should make its presentation to members of Parliament, be it at the Committee of Finance or in a central committee, in a public forum. I do not believe the handling of discussions, particularly in regards to your advice on the draft national budget, an advice which is available for public consumption, merits the needs to not allow the public, other civil servants, other relevant entities locally and within the kingdom to observe. After all, the debate of the national budget is a public debate, and this meeting is an important precursor to that very debate. In the discussion over the phone, you will recall I even offered a solution where, if a particular topic is deemed sensitive in nature, as chairman, I would allow that part to be left out if the other MPs also agree with the sensitive nature of that very topic in question. For example, if it's related to something in regards to an ongoing judicial investigation, matters of national security, competitive advantage, etc. In the past, the CFT has come to Parliament in its closed-door sessions. Shortly after this session, the very same information that was presented was given at a press conference by the CFT. This gives the impression that the meetings of the past have not actually had any real secrets that would not be adequate for public consumption. Therefore, it is still very unclear to me why the CFT would insist on meeting behind closed doors with Parliament. It may even beg the question as to what the CFT believes it has to hide in regards to the management of the country's finances. I am very disappointed to learn that what I believe to be a very fair request, have the CFT present to and have a discourse with members of Parliament in a public forum, is not something the CFT is willing to accommodate, as is being requested by the very body that must approve the budget of the country. I would also like to draw your attention to the Rijkswet Financieel Toezicht in regards to your responsibility in reporting to the Parliament of St. Maarten and Curaçao. In Article 4, under taken, it says, de taken van de college zijn onverminderd de in andere artikelen van deze wet genoemde taken, and when you go to part C, het rapporteren en adviseren van onze ministers van Financiën van de landen, de beide staten, so that refers to Curaçao and St. Maarten, de besturen en door tussenkomst van onze minister, de Raad van Ministers van het Koninkrijk. It is very clear that the CFT has a very clear tack to report to the Parliament of St. Maarten. The explanatory memorandum explains the logic behind your need to report to the ministers and Parliament without making a distinction between the two. After all, it says en de staten, not of de staten. Het college heeft een inlichtingenplicht ten opzichte van deze ministers, i.e. also the staten as outlined in Article 1C. With the responsibility to report and advise having been established, it is then up to the Parliament of St. Maarten, by means of its rules of order, to decide how the meeting should proceed. As per Article 26 of our Rules of Order, All our committee meetings are assumed public unless it is decided so by the committee. We can choose to hold it closed door, but that is the choice of Parliament, not the ultimate choice of the third party in attendance. Sure, the entity attending can choose not to attend, and it seems that this is what the CFT has chosen. But at this very moment, I believe my reasoning for it being open has been very well motivated and is very fair. As such, I will be convening the meeting on Tuesday, the 18th of February at 11:45 a.m. While I can only hope that the CFT still decides to honor our request to present to us in a public forum, I am not in any position to force the CFT to attend. However, I think it would be a shame to not take the opportunity to sit with all the newly sworn MPs who will be in attendance to discuss such urgent matters with regards to our country's finances. Kind regards, Rolando Bryson, President of Parliament. Members of Parliament and public, that was the email that I sent to motivate my request for having the CFT present not just to us, but to the people of St. Maarten in terms of the discussion about the country's finances. This was on February the 13th, Thursday, February 13th at 2:50 p.m. I have since received at 12:24 p.m. yesterday, that is on the 17th, a reply to that email, which unfortunately I was not able to see until this morning because, as you know, last night we were here until late with Parliament meetings. And the reply, which is in Dutch, is as follows. Geachte heer Bryson, het College Financieel Toezicht van Curaçao en Sint Maarten is deze week in Sint Maarten en heeft onder meer vertrouwelijke gesprekken met ministers, de ministerraad en de directies van diverse andere organisaties. Zoals gewoonlijk heeft het college aangeboden in het vervolg op deze gesprekken de leden van de Staten van Sint Maarten te informeren over de financiën van het land Sint Maarten. Zoals sinds 2010 gebruikelijk bij alle landen van het Koninkrijk zijn de statenbijeenkomsten besloten van aard aangezien hierin informatie gebaseerd op de inhoud van de vertrouwelijke gesprekken gedeeld wordt. In uw e-mail van 13 februari heeft u bezwaar gemaakt tegen een besloten bijeenkomst en aangegeven hiervoor niet beschikbaar te zijn. Het college neemt hier kennis van en zal dus de statenleden niet kunnen informeren. So to translate that last piece in English, the college, the CFT, has taken note of my email and therefore will not be informing the members of Parliament. Members of Parliament, the CFT, as we can see, is not with us today. I hope that I have been able to, as best possible, motivate my reasoning for having the CFT here in a public forum, while in their reply they say, well, there's vertrouwelijke information. My request accounted for that by saying, let us begin the public aspect of it, and if there are indeed any vertrouwelijke information, then that could be something that we can handle in a future closed door. However, members of Parliament, I do respect, of course, if the wish is to still honor the CFT with a closed-door meeting. That I leave to the members of Parliament. However, today, I did not feel, and based on past experience and based on their responsibility, as per the Rijkswet, to report to Parliament, that they should be the ones to determine whether this meeting should be open or not. So, members of Parliament, I turn to you for any comments on this matter. Again, I think it's unfortunate that they're not here and living up to what I believe is that responsibility that they have, but I'm eager to hear the opinions or positions of any other members of Parliament, if there are any. I have Member Otley, you have the floor.
Good day, Mr. Chairman. Good day to people viewing on Facebook, those listening on the radio, those in the Tribune, my fellow colleagues. As a new incoming member of Parliament, it is very disappointing to see that other organizations that should answer to Parliament are basically trying to dictate the operation that we carry out. I think that the CFT has a very important role to play, for it determines the country's budget. I think that this is indeed a public matter. St. Martin has always been listed as having ulterior motive. Therefore, we are supervised with our budget. We are told basically what we should do and what is most important with our budget. So I think that this was the opportunity and a new wave to show transparency to the people of St. Martin. And basically, I would like the people of St. Martin to realize that the Parliament made the strides to be transparent, and the CFT is requesting a closed-door meeting. So my question is, who is leading? Is the carriage leading the horse, or the horse leading the carriage? So this is what I would like to know, and I would just like to stress my disappointment in the CFT for not being present.
Thank you, MP Otley. Any other members of Parliament wishing to take the floor? MP Sarah Westcott Williams.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon by now, and good afternoon to my colleagues and all tuned in to this meeting of Parliament. Mr. Chairman, let me start by saying that I can completely agree with your argument and even your proposal as put forward to the CFT. At the same time, I wish to acknowledge that the discussion regarding the closed door or not with the CFT is as old as the country St. Martin is. So from 10-10-10, as the CFT picked up its duties, it has always been a discussion, why close door sessions with Parliament? And as you pointed out in your email, the fact is that normally after these meetings, so-called confidential meetings, the CFT would have a press briefing, and I have not experienced any information that we would have learned so-called behind closed doors that was not divulged during their press briefings. So I regret too that the compromise, if you wish, that was offered in terms of let's start out, and the minute the CFT that is saying, well, my next point is going to be a very confidential point, it would be up to the Parliament to decide to have a closed door meeting at that time. However, like we would do with any request from third parties for a closed door session, is based that request on the merits of the request. And I think the merits of this meeting, or demerits, would be, is there something that we would like to put to the CFT or get from the CFT at this time that would warrant us to say, well, okay, CFT, we don't agree with this constant, yet has to be behind closed doors of yours, but because we want to hear something, act something, and this is that would be an opportunity to do so, then we make that decision. So is there something at this time that we would really like to sit face-to-face with the CFT and put to the CFT, or ask the CFT, and which unfortunately from their perspective would have to be behind closed doors? I think that is maybe where we should take this discussion. I've learned that their report on the budget of St. Martin has been issued. Haven't seen it, of course, but that report too will be copied to the Parliament. If it was already at the same time that it was sent to the government, then I think it would be a good opportunity to question the CFT on some of the assumptions and recommendations that it would have made on the budget 2000 and draft budget 2020. So I think after having established that, yeah, unfortunate, and they are suggesting how they are to comply with their reporting duty, or giving information, not so much like reporting, but providing information to Parliament from the parts of the law that you already quoted. But again, now from Parliament's side, is there anything that we would like to put to the members of the CFT? And and would then have to kind of take their terms to get that message to them. That's the question that I think we should contemplate on during this session to which they are not appearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott. MP Samuel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Good morning to the Griffier, to my colleagues, to those in, good afternoon to you, to the Griffier, to my colleagues, those in the Tribune, and all those who are listening. Mr. Chairman, indeed it is so that from the meetings that I have had with the CFT as a member of Parliament, there has always been closed-door meetings. And when we listen to the press release or the press briefing that the CFT have after the meeting with Parliament, we usually, as members of Parliament, say, but why couldn't the meeting be open? Because most of the stuff that we discuss with CFT is what CFT usually discusses with the press, with the media. For today, Mr. Chairman, I believe that CFT is in St. Martin, and even though CFT might have an objection or a reason or an idea that they should not want the meeting to be public, I think it would have been better for CFT to have come to Parliament, and we could have then looked at the agenda, and based on the agenda that the CFT would have for today, because we would then be able to say, well, okay, agenda point so and so, we will have in the end, we would just make an agenda change and do the sensitive part according to the CFT, maybe in closed-door session. So I hope moving forward, as everybody have been asking, it is always good to let the public know and the public see that the members of Parliament ask certain questions to CFT. CFT is a kind of a secret thing in our society. They give secretly information, and why does it look secretly? Because the meeting cannot be held in public. So the people only are left to what the CFT tells them after the meeting. And moving forward in St. Martin, more and more the public has been asking for more transparency. I do hope that we can meet with the CFT very short, because they do have a lot to say about the budget of St. Martin, and I think the public too would like to hear the CFT direct once or twice. I thank you.
Thank you, MP Samuel. MP Boncamper, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the radio listeners and all. Mr. Chairman, it's unfortunately that the CFT decided to no-show. They gave an advice that is often crippling to the company, the government, sorry. And when you do this, you don't want to talk about it in public. You only want to keep your press release where the question and answer is based on what they say. I think as a parliament, we're expected to pass a budget for this country where the CFT has already given their advice, and they're not planning to change it anyway. It isn't as if after they discuss it with us, they'll go back home, change their advice, and send it back to government. So what's the issue of having a public meeting? It isn't as if there are national treasuries that we're going to say, oh, hey, go and dig here, you'll find money, like how they thought I had 3 million, and they dig up my whole yard. But nevertheless, we have to understand what the role of CFT is. CFT has been instrumental since 10-10-10. I'm a former civil servant. I've seen the destruction CFT does to a budget. I see how it cripples a country from being able to borrow and enhance and move forward. And every day when we ask for liquidity support, we get another hurdle to cross. And I had a question today for CFT, because I truly wanted to know their position on how they perceive the Dutch government's policy that if you don't pass pension reform, you don't get money. If you don't build a prison, you don't get money. If you don't do this, you don't get money. But to do certain things, I need money, but you're telling me I can't borrow. So Are they there to ensure that we fail eventually so that they can take over totally? Is that their departure point? And by not coming here, you're showing me that you're very disrespectful to the highest body of the country. You can come here and give your presentation in the sense of what you deem is public consumption because you're going to state it an hour later in the press release. You could have come here and do that and say, well, Mr. Chairman, the rest of it, I unfortunately cannot divulge at this point in time because we believe it's of a confidential nature. But you don't disrespect Parliament by just not showing up. And a matter of, I can't force you. I'm not saying you can force them, but they have an obligation. They ask for a meeting. We are all sitting here. And on the other side, I see 5 water glasses and 5 bottles of water. That's what we are talking to, besides the public of St. Martin. It's very unfortunate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Bonkamper. Any other MPs wishing to speak at this time? MP William Marlin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you, to the Refir support staff, visitors in the Public Tribune. A good afternoon to colleagues as well, and all those listening and viewing by any media. I don't know if we can say today marks a turning point. Today is maybe a historic day. Could it be that previous parliaments have allowed the CFT to develop into what it has become, one that, based on the law, should give account to Parliament? And yes, we can argue whether that account should be in a public forum or not, but CFT is not the boss of Parliament. St. Martin is the highest body representing the people of St. Martin. The Parliament is elected by the people of St. Martin. They are who speak on behalf of the people. In a democracy, if we look at what's developing now in the United States, whereby some people feel that democracy is being hijacked and that a president feels that he can do whatever he feels like because he is the president, we can sort of say that over the years, some of these institutions, and CFT is one that stands out, of course, has become sort of a government on its own. They decide for Parliament. They dictate to Parliament. They decide whether they're coming, when they're coming, what they will say. And what was always interesting, that they come in a closed-door session, and 5 minutes after, it's all over the news. It's all over the globe. It's all over the kingdom. So then the question would be, why closed door? What is it that you have to tell Parliament that you can't allow the public to hear? Are you protecting Parliament? You don't want the public to know that you're telling Parliament that they should refrain from this or refrain from that. The public has never been able to hear the arguments as brought forward and or presented by Parliament or members of Parliament, while they have been allowed to hear the CFT dictate to St. Martin what is allowed and what is not allowed. In one of my previous periods, as I believe I was Prime Minister at the time, Minister Gibson, Richard Gibson, was Minister of Finance, and it was one of the worst things that I have seen. If we know Richard Gibson well, you know he's a drill sergeant, and we used to call him Mr. No, because with him, the budget is like a pie, and it has so many slices. And if we want to give 7 of the 10 slices to education, then there's only 3 left for everybody else. And if we want to give anybody 4 or 5, then we would have to take 1 or 2 slices from education, because there is only 10 or 12 slices that you have. So Minister Gibson went about like a drill sergeant to ensure, and being a former member of the CFT as well, he wanted to ensure that everything was in line. And here we had complied. The budget was balanced. The budget was presented to CFT. CFT gave it a positive advice. It came to Parliament. Parliament approved it. The budget was established. Part and parcel of that budget was a capital budget, I think, in the range of 38 million guilders that the country was to borrow that year for its capital expenditures. Ministers had their portion allocated to them, and when Minister Gibson now got ready to request the loan to fund the capital budget, here comes CFT with an advice that became basically an instruction, because it's not like CFT is advising you, guys, it's not a wise thing to do, but when CFT says, no, it can't be done, then the kingdom government decides, no, you can't do it, and then government would have to comply. Lo and behold, CFT then out of left field decided 38 million was actually, we believe, too much for St. Martin to spend in 1 year, or to commit in 1 year. So therefore, CFT believes that St. Martin should not borrow more than 20 million. And on a going forward basis, they believe that St. Martin should cut back on the amount that they are borrowing. And then you get that awkward situation that we are placed in. We are a young country, now going on 10 years. We are expected to do so much for the development of the country. We're expected to make investments to improve on our infrastructure, on education, housing, public health, safety, police, prison. All of it we are expected to do. Are they helping? No, they're not helping. They're giving you instructions on what you should and you should not do. And here it is, you have an approved budget, you have an approved capital expenditure budget, and without any plausible explanation, really. And the thing is, they can disagree with you, but you can't disagree with them. It is almost like the notorious dispute regulation. When you are wrong, but if the Dutch government is wrong, they reserve the right to say, no, we are not wrong, we are right. And I've said it more than once. Was 10-10-10 the results? 10-10-10 became the results of what we negotiated, what we voted for in 2000 in the referendum. If that is what it is, where we are a so-called country in the kingdom, but then we are pushed around, beat up whenever necessary, one condition after the other. We can't really develop because we are put in a stiff jacket. We look at other Caribbean islands around, Caribbean countries that were kind of lagging behind St. Martin and are now bypassing St. Martin in their development because they do not have the yoke of someone else deciding for them what it is they need to do, how to do it, and when to do it. When we look at the situation that has developed in Statia, it is frightening. It is frightening because democracy was simply hijacked. And then now, just recently I was speaking to a politician from there, and I said, hey, how things are going? I understood you guys are having election. And then it was like, well, I'm not too sure if it is an election, because what we are electing, the body will just have an advisory role. So it's not yet a full-fledged island council that will be elected. It will be an island council that has an advisory role. I mean, how long must this go on? And are we then to expect that St. Martin is going to follow in those footsteps the way we are being treated? If you don't, you want a glass of water, there's a condition to it. You want a case of water, there are more conditions to it. And if you want a loaf of bread, again, there are more conditions to it. We cannot continue that way. And CFT, yes. And the reason for CFT being there was to ensure that the new countries, Curacao and St. Martin, do not go through what the Netherlands Antilles went through. We all agreed. The Netherlands Antilles was in a financial mess, and I paused there because I don't want to criticize the Netherlands Antilles for creating the mess, because at a given moment, the make-up of the Netherlands Antilles in itself was a challenge. And I have been there actively as a member of parliament and a member of government during the period of former Prime Minister Miguel Poirier, when the same Dutch government told him, we will help if you do this. Mr. Poirier did. We will assist if you do that. Mr. Poirier did. We will assist if you do. We will assist if you do. We will assist if you do. More and more conditions, more and more conditions. At a given moment, it was like, how much more can I take away from the people? How much more can I squeeze the people? And when Poirier had stripped the government of everything and have stripped the people almost naked, the Dutch government left him hanging. Left him hanging. Now, for many members of parliament, the name Miguel Poirier might sound like, oh, I think I've heard that name sometime before, like some of us may know because we learned in the history books about some of the former leaders, Winston Churchill or Hitler or somebody else. And so, therefore, it may not be too well known, but I have lived through that period and have seen what the Dutch government did then. And we are basically seeing it now. And I believe that the CFT has misused its power. And then I can recall as well the times that during the period that the Finance Minister Chewett was in office, and the CFT and him were in a constant back and forth, because if the minister made a projection that we will collect 3 million in taxes, and the CFT decided, no, we believe you will only collect 1 million, so therefore you got to cut the budget with an extra 2 million, and therefore you can't project to invest in education or sports or culture or give social assistance to people, because we believe. Now, can Chewett prove that he will collect 3 million? No, he can't, because it's a projection. But can CFT prove that he can't collect the 3 million? That too is a projection. But rather than finding a compromise or a middle way, the CFT's authority was, no, we decide it is not possible. So rather than having a public debate, because that at a given moment would become necessary, that people would hear CFT telling members of parliament, you know why we told the government not to do this? Because of Peter, Paul, Mary, and Harry. And then that members of parliament can push back and say, no, we don't agree. No, we don't agree. No, it is not right. Or yes, we see where you're coming from. But no, they come here, they lecture to parliament, They tell Parliament, Parliament can ask what they want. They're on a time constraint. They got to catch a flight, and they have a press briefing booked. That they can't miss out on because they have to justify maybe their presence here. They go, they hold their press briefing, and then the public is wondering, what is CFT? What did CFT say? And then we see big headlines. CFT said 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But do we know what Parliament said about it? No, we didn't, because it was behind closed doors. So, Mr. Chairman, I support the stance you have taken 100%. I believe, as I said in the opening, that today is a historic day. It marks maybe a new beginning, hopefully a new beginning in the way that CFT will continue or will conduct its business with St. Martin, or at least with the St. Martin Parliament. People have called for stability throughout this election. Stability has been promised by members of Parliament and those who intend to assume a position in government. And therefore, hopefully, if we stay the course as Parliament and back and support the stance taken by the chairman, that something will have to give, because there is an obligation in the law for CFT to report to Parliament, and the CFT unilaterally decides, this is the only way I will report to you behind closed doors and no other shape, form, or fashion, then we're in for a standoff. It won't be a Mexican one, because when I look around the room, I see no Mexican ethnicity here, but it will be a standoff. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Thank you, MP Marlin. Do we have any other MPs wishing to use the floor at this time? MP Westcott, you have the floor once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just two additional points in this context. One, I think it's important to take note of some historic facts with respect to CFT and their meetings with parliaments. And in this case, I specifically want to refer when back in 2014, on the basis of a discussion with the CFT in the Parliament of Curacao, and the issue of not only closed doors, and this is the part I want to emphasize, but also the confidentiality of information in these meetings, which is something that we will have to distinguish, because alleged breaching of the confidentiality of information provided by CFT in a meeting of the Parliament of Curacao back in 2014 led to a member of Parliament exactly being sentenced for having breached the confidentiality. So we need to take into consideration as well that behind closed doors is one thing, but determining that information presented is confidential is another issue, not only for meetings with the CFT, but generally when we talk about meetings behind closed doors. So I just wanted to give that little aspect as well.
Thank you, MP Westcott, and thank you for all members of Parliament. Your comments have been duly noted. I just want to touch on a few of those points. One thing I want to mention, and last week we had orientation week with the members of Parliament, and the trainer, Ms. Ardern, she said if it's one thing she wants to leave with members of Parliament, and she said this quote, do not undermine your own authority as members of Parliament. And that stuck with me, because it is not the type of situation where the decision or the stance I took with the CFT was simply something where I just feel so. The reporting obligation is theirs, and the organization of meetings, the obligation is with the members of Parliament. And I do not feel that we should, as members of Parliament, undermine our own authority to dictate this is the way we believe things should be done. And I think, as other members have pointed out, there was a fair compromise to handle confidential information in such a way where we can easily, for example, close the meeting at a certain point if they believe, well, there's some additional things we want to tell you, but those are sensitive in nature. But even with that proposal, still here today, we see, as MP Boncamper stated, we just have bottles of water and glasses, unfortunately, across from us. I believe that the stance I've taken is something that is necessary, having been given the confidence of the people of St. Martin and also members of parliament to sit on this chair and organize meetings in such a way that I believe can be conducive to effective debate. It is with that mandate that I said, you know, I believe that this would be the most effective way to conduct meetings with a body that is publicly appointed and that is here to advise us on the public document of the national budget. So members of parliament, I can just tell you I will be forwarding, just for transparency's sake, to our colleagues within the kingdom, the chairs of the parliaments of Curaçao and Aruba, as well as the kingdom relations committees within the kingdom, so that they can be abreast of this, and then we can see if there's any other ways that we can prevent a situation like MP Marlin pointed out, where I don't want this to be a standoff, and I don't believe it needs to be. I think that the CFT should come to parliament in the matter that we dictate is best for the people and for the best for us to do our jobs. And I'm glad to see that so many members of parliament are standing with me on that position that I've taken and that stance I've taken. For now, we, of course, don't have the CFT with us today. They are indeed, unfortunately, a no-show. So with that, I don't have any other choice, having heard from the members of parliament, other than to close the meeting and continue to find a way to get them to live up to their legal responsibility of reporting to this parliament. So members of parliament, I thank you very much for your attention and participation in this meeting, and I hereby close this committee meeting of parliament. Meeting closed.